welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. After improvising a new bedtime story for my children almost every night for more than 15 years, I concluded at the end of 2020 with this story of Myra and the Online School for Adventuring. My children and I are thrilled to share it with you now and hope you're enjoying it as much as we did. For a moment, Myra froze, and then it all clicked together. She blurted out, "Knowledge? Didn't you hear me, child? Run! But run now, let's go!" Knowledge sprang from behind her desk and almost dragged Myra out the door. Myra could see that they were headed towards the front doors and shook off Knowledge's hand. As they began sprinting towards the front doors together, Myra had no idea where they were going or why, and as they reached the front door, she saw those runes that she had noticed earlier on either side suddenly glow briefly with a rainbow of colors, and Knowledge stopped like she had hit a wall, actually bouncing backwards a little bit. She looked at Myra. "You've got to go," she said, and then she peered out the front doors and said, "It's too late." She glanced around. "You just returned a book?" "Yes," said Myra. "Did you read it?" said Knowledge. "Yes," said Myra, but Knowledge ran over to the circulation desk, unerringly grabbed the book on hiding from magic users from the stack of returned books, ran towards Myra, and then, in a moment that Myra could not explain, Knowledge took the book and hit her in the face with it, except she didn't. The book passed through into her and disappeared, and suddenly Myra felt a shift inside her, like everything that was in that book was suddenly part of her. "Now," said Knowledge, "hide," and then turned and ran into the stacks. Myra glanced out the front door and could see the administrator running towards the library, something she had never seen him do before. She looked around and then ran into the stacks in the direction Knowledge had gone, but she was not looking for Knowledge. She was looking for a place to hide. Seconds later, she heard an alarm sound through the library. Doot, doot, doot. And the administrator's voice seemed to come from everywhere. "Students, there is a fire in the library. Please exit in an orderly manner." Myra saw people making their way towards the front door. She looked around. She saw that in going the direction Knowledge had gone, she was back close to that nondescript office door. She looked around. There was a place where two shelves came together, and the lighting was not quite as good. She stepped into it, into the shadows, and then, in something that she had read about but not understood in that book about hiding from magic users, she stepped physically into the shadow, and then also, somehow, stepped deeper within herself, like she was less there somehow. She didn't understand it, but she didn't have much time to think about it. She looked back down the rows of shelves and saw James Broker, the administrator, making his way unerringly toward the librarian, Knowledge's office. Myra looked over and saw Knowledge scoop up the cinnamon roll and fling it unerringly out the door and up to one of the tops of the shelves. She glanced back. The administrator was so intent on the door he had not caught it. Myra watched as he made his way to the door of the librarian's office. "What have you done? You've gone and ruined yourself. I shall have to fix you now." "Your time is limited," Knowledge replied. "We have foreseen this. Your time is running out." "Yes," said the administrator. "You all seem to say that a lot. I seem to recall you saying that when I caught you, each of you separately, and shaped you into what I needed you to be. Well, no matter. He stepped into the office, and Myra's skin tingled. Her hair stood on end. There were clearly powerful magics at work in that office. She saw a faint glow under the door, and then there was a popping sound. The door swung open, and James Broker stepped out. He looked around. He glanced up toward the top of the shelves where the cinnamon roll had gone. He began to float in the air up to the top of the shelves. Myra watched as he picked the cinnamon roll off. He said. Clever of her to try to hide it. Now I wonder, how could this have gotten in here? He looked around. Myra sunk deeper into herself. He raised his hand, and a green glow began to sweep away from him in an orb. Myra sunk so deep into herself, for a moment she held her breath as the green light passed over and through her, and then beyond, until she suspected it had encompassed the entire library. She risked a glance back up at the administrator. He was looking roughly in her direction with a slight frown on his face. But if he had seen her, he would have said something by now, surely. She was in plain sight, or plain sight for a sneaker that didn't know how to hide properly. After a moment, he floated down to the floor, and the green glow disappeared. Myra noticed in that moment that he had streaks of white in his hair and wrinkles at the corners of his eyes that she did not remember being there before. He looked around one last time and then walked towards the front of the library. Myra let her breath out slowly and then breathed in again. She counted to 10, and then for good measure she counted to 100, and then she waited longer until she started to hear the sounds of life returning to the library as students filed back in after the fake fire alarm. And then she moved out of the shadows, expecting the administrator to pop up out of nowhere. But no, the library was returning to its normal life. For a moment she was torn. All she really wanted to do was get out. But she couldn't leave without looking. She walked over to the door of the librarian's office. She half expected to see a body on the floor, or to see the smoking ruin of the office. But as she peeked in, it looked completely normal. The librarian was sitting behind her desk, working with some papers, but as soon as Myra had peeked through the door, the librarian looked up straight at her and said, "Yes, student Myra, may I help you with something?" Said Myra. "No, I was just here looking some things up, and I wanted to check in and say hi." "Well," said the librarian, "how very thoughtful of you." "So," said Myra, "you're doing okay?" "I'm fine, thank you," said the librarian. "Very busy, though. I have much to attend to." "Yeah," said Myra. "Well, you have a good day." "You too," said the librarian. Myra walked toward the front of the library and exited and headed back towards her dorm room. It was time to talk with Tweety and the rest of her friends. She thought that what was going on at the online school was so much more terrible than she had ever imagined, now that they finally had a real, true clue of what had happened to the Fates. It had only redoubled her determination to set things right, whatever the cost. That is the end for tonight. Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's show, but questions and commentary were supplied by my children. The theme music was written by Brandon Thompson, and our wonderful logo was designed by Silas Wendelin. If you're enjoying the show, please tell someone about it, and leave a review with your podcast provider. You can now subscribe to the show to get extra stories and longer chapters of Myra and the Online School that combine multiple segments into a longer episode. The show's website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.buzzsprout.com. Until next time, I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.